Bonjour à tous et à toutes. Hello everyone, welcome to FMD Connected. Today this discussion will be mostly in English since our guest Willo Perron has been living in Los Angeles for almost 20 years, and it will be probably easier for him in some details and all the things he's going to tell us today. L'entrevue sera donc principalement en anglais parce que Willo Perron vit depuis 20 ans à Los Angeles. Je ne vais pas défiler son CV parce qu'il y a beaucoup trop à dire. Il porte plusieurs chapeaux. But I must say, the main title is creative director. He has worked with amazing musicians like Kanye West, Rihanna, Drake, Jay-Z, Florence and the Machine. It sounds like the list of the nominations at the Grammys. He works on scenography, the packaging, the photography. I could say anything related to the visual aspect of any production. Bonjour, Willo Perron. Thank you for having accepted the invitation. I'm very happy and excited with this. And I think you are a busy man. I've read that you're working on almost 20 projects right now. Am I right?
Yeah, well, I have the studio with a bunch of people, so we're always working on a range of projects all the time. So yeah, there's at any given time, there's probably upwards of 20 projects.
I feel that you're a very calm and quiet guy. Do you keep your calm all the time? Are you always like that? Or sometimes you get nervous with all those projects going on?
I think I'm generally pretty calm. I think I have a very good exterior shell of calmness. I don't know if it's, I keep the anxiety inside.
I was wondering what was the spirit in LA since this beginning of the pandemic, and it's a strange time for many people, and mostly people also that live with being on stage, and you're related to those people. So what's the feeling generally in California or in LA?
We're super fortunate, and it's it's been really beautiful here, and we haven't been affected that badly. I think the only thing that is maybe a little bit more difficult is that we can't work in our studio or we can't meet up with anybody, but I think that's the case with everybody. I don't know. And as far as like people perform, at least the people I work with, I think everybody's taking this as a little bit of a moment to sort of sit back and kind of reflect and work on new things and not have to be on the sort of like hamster wheel of like putting out something and performing. And so I think I feel like there's going to be a lot of great things that are going to come out of this artistically because people have had a minute to pause and really kind of take stock of their lives and everything else,
For now, it didn't stop you from being creative. Did you take a pause? Did you stop for a while just to think, or you had to follow with all the projects?
I'm half and half. Obviously been spending a lot of time at home, and probably the most time I've ever spent at home in my life. So I've really had time to appreciate that and to read more and to watch more films. And I think my intake has been really good, where normally it's just mostly output. I've had time to sort of like input a lot more information. And that will, translate when we get back into work and everything. It'll be like, I think a lot more new ideas will come from it.
Let's hope so. We will go back in time. I've stolen a picture from your brother's website, Facebook page, in fact. And we know Zébulon in Montreal because he's famous for all the restaurants for the Four Seasons Hotel. But it's a picture of you as a little kid, and it's your father here, a great jazz musician, Billy Georgette, and your mother. It's on Waverly Street, and you had parents that were artists and creative people.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see the influence they had on you? Do you see that that's how you became so interested in music and design as well?
Yeah, for sure. I think me and Zeb were super fortunate, you know. First and foremost, I have like a brother named Zebulon. Like, it's just like as a starting point, you just life's not going to be like normal. Uh, and yeah, it was like a default setting. It wasn't even um, like, oh, this was a thing that marginal people did, or this was exceptionalism or anything. It was just like, that's what people did. Like, our environment was, you made things, you created things, you know, you worked with creativity and art in your hands, and uh, whether it's to make music or, you know, my mom actually in when we lived in this house used to make, you know, macrame lamps and things like that. And uh, yeah, it was just, you know, it was just like part of our daily lives. And it took me a long time to realize that that wasn't the normal, you know, that that wasn't how everybody lived. That, you know,
That,
music and creativity and sort of like those conversations weren't just like kind of par for the course.
there must have been musicians at the house. When I see this picture, which is so much like the 70s, I can imagine Leonard Cohen coming in, or people, jazz musicians. Was it the case?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know as much as like Leonard Cohen, but uh, yeah, like all of the, you know, my father was surrounded by musicians, and yeah, there was a lot of that. Um, Yeah, you know, there was like a score kind of to our lives. You're just really digging up these photos.
This one is wonderful. You're a teenager with your brother, and it's nice to see this. It's taken, I think, in the States. And
This is Zeb. Zeb used to have like a full like rockabilly haircut. Like it was just like really gelled, and this was at our aunts and uncle's house in Massachusetts, and it was probably like one of the only times that Zeb didn't have like gel for like a few weeks. Hence why he has like this haircut.
it's funny, you have almost a haircut. In the, I wanted to show that picture as well because I asked him, he sent me a message an hour ago, and I wanted to read it to you. It's Zibelon talking. In our relationship, one of the important aspects for me was that he always had this unshakable faith that we could do great things. His uncanny ability to parlay his way into the most incredible situations and jobs was always underwritten by a vast amount of research and knowledge about his subject. I think that is by educating himself that he gained legitimacy. That said, it also takes some big fucking balls. Sorry for the F word.
Don't worry. I swear so much it's out of control. So,
do you think it's a good description of who you are and what you believe in?
I mean, yeah, it's kind of funny to be like memorialized, but yeah, I mean, I don't really know. It means that we're so different in a lot of ways. Um, he's so precise and patient and like, you know, he's so much finesse and focus, and I'm the total opposite. I just like wake up and I'm like, I had an idea, and then I just like burrow down that way. And um Zeb has more of a formal education, not very much, but like he went to university and for a little bit, and I think like his career had already started. I have zero formal education, so
You learn by yourself.
yeah, you know, we're both pretty uh self-taught, but I think like I really went, I like to make mistakes as my like learning tool. I think it's just like try things and fuck up and like keep trying and keep trying. And like I think Zeb like is more studious in that way. So we're very opposite in sort of our
Mhm.
methodology.
It
Um,
seems that as a teenager, as a young man, you had three passions. I see music, skate and snow, probably,
yeah.
from what I've read, and clothing also, fashion somehow, or the interest in those fields. And how is it by the design came along those things that you wanted to make links with? The idea of
Yeah, I think like well, you know, we were always like designers, like in a weird way. If I look back at like drawings that I have from, probably like 10 years old, I would like draw homes and like plans and like draw like full clothing collections and like sneakers um and I think that that comes from, we were pretty poor, and like it's just sort of like this dream of where you would want to live for like the things that you would want, like the I think that that's probably the first motivator. And also you know we just drew all the time. Like that's all we did was just drew all the time. And I think that kind of going into teenage years and like young adulthood, um it sort of became a, oh, okay, so this all this stuff on paper, how do we like sort of make this into real things? And again, through sort of making mistakes and kind of like trying things out, and you know I've always also really been interested in sort of like cultural movement and subcultures, and sort of like figuring out those things, and just like meeting friends, and like people were all into the kind of the same type of music, and like sort of studying that. And I always had like a weird approach to that, where I was like really ingrained in one thing, and then also really ingrained in three other things. Whereas like the normal person would just be like really ingrained into sort of their thing. Um, but I just like really liked other things. Like I was really interested by other subcultures and subgenres, and so I would just like navigate between these things. And the eventuality of it is just like, oh, you start making the flyers for the club, and then we put on nights and like club nights, and then like eventually like that has a style, and you start making the clothes that goes with the thing, and it just like sort of like sequences itself kind of naturally, you know?
the move to LA came with another Montrealer, Dov Charney, the creator of American Apparel. That was the main thing that brought you there.
No,
You
actually,
know?
no. I moved to California in 1998 uh, to work for a snowboard and a skate company, um, to sort of head up the design department for two, like, um, one was in a skate apparel brand, and one was like a snowboard outerwear company. And I came here, and I really didn't like it. Like it actually made me quite miserable. Um, and um, from there, I went back to New York, and then back to Montreal, and then me and Dove crossed paths. We knew each other from friends from before, but we crossed paths, and I'd been back in Montreal for a little bit, and I'd opened some stores. I used to have like some retail stores in Montreal, and he came into our design studio. And actually, me and Zeb shared a space at this time, and Zeb worked in the same studio as me. And he just walked in off the street because the studio was on Pine Avenue and St. Dominic. No, Clark. Sorry. No, St. Dominic. St. Dominic. Uh, and he just walked off the street and he was like, "Hey, this is cool. What do you guys do here?" And blah, blah, blah. And I turned around because my chair was facing. And he was like, "Ah, Willo." He's like, "It had to be you." And then we just like walked around and talked about doing retail stores and stuff like that. And I took him to some of my other stores. And he's like, "Let's open a store." And we just built a store in Montreal. The very first American Apparel was actually like on St. Lawrence and like between Prince Arthur and Milton.
Yeah, I remember. We will talk, of course, about music and all the people you worked with, but I wanted to show the link that you have with fashion, because a year ago, almost day to day, because June 3rd, there was this presentation of the Alexander Wang fashion show. And it's to present one of the aspects of your work, but the link you still have with the world of fashion. And it was at the Rockefeller Center. Very impressive when we see this picture from the sky. And I wanted to know, what did you want to create? What type of fashion show did you want to make with it?
There's a few things that are happening here. One is like the Alex wanted to represent the New York American sort of like designer, which is, you know, Calvin Klein and Donna Karan and Ralph Lauren, and really kind of a nod to kind of American fashion. And the beginning of the conversation was where can we do it that feels really iconic, you know, that feels like New York City, like there's no doubt that you're in the middle of fucking New York City. So this was the first thing, was having it kind of in an iconic place, which is Rockefeller Center. Secondly, was about having something that the public could witness. You know, there's a sense, especially with Alex, he's more of a populist guy, and he's like, he's very kind of charismatic and involved, and you want to do something that the public could see. And I think that like more and more you see fashion shows kind of incorporate the public or have some sort of, you know, and sort of peel away the sort of like elitist onion, if you will. And then lastly was about bringing an element of sort of modernity and technology and kind of that whole thing. And so we just did kind of this big LED floor, and there you go.
It's quite impressive. We know in fashion very often there's not much time to install everything and to organize things. It must have been quite a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, we had to kind of do rehearsals in front of the public, and we had like all the girls in like bathrobes walking, and yeah, but I feel like it's also like the fun part of it is the chaos that leads up to it. Like if you really, really think about it, it doesn't need to be that chaotic. It could be more organized, but I think that the chaos leading up to it. Sorry, I just throwing my phone to steps ring. Is kind of the fun part of the show. You know, it's like
it's part of the spirit of the fashion.
Yeah, if there was no deadlines, you know, like we would never work as well as we did.
At one point in your life in LA, you meet Kanye West. We have to talk about it. He's a big part of your life. And
actually, just to correct you, I met him in Kuala Lumpur.
Oh, that's even better than LA, probably.
Yeah, I met him. He was doing his very last show from a tour, and A-Track, who's actually another Montrealer, was his DJ at the time. and we're friends, and I just saw like an advertising for the show. And I was like, I texted him, and I was like, oh, I'm in KL, you here? And he was like, yeah. So we hung out. He's like, come to the show. And I came to the show. And then that's where me and Kanye met for the first time.
So it was a natural discussion. There was no meetings before. You became friends, and then you started working with him. That's the way it
Yeah.
worked.
Yeah. Well, he's, you know, he's incredibly curious, and like he's like a, you know, like insatiable curiosity, which I think is what makes him so great, is just like constantly wanting to learn, and I think that he was really interested in design and design arts and fashion, and he knew about my work. There's a few crossovers uh, in kind of our history, um, and he was just very curious. He was like, can we just like talk about all this stuff? And I was like, yes. And it just became a conversation that's lasted like 12 years, you know?
There's also a question of trust. I suppose he felt that he could trust you on many things.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we sort of built a language together, you know? It wasn't so much just like, oh, here it is, you know, like, have a good time. It was like us just kind of like challenging each other. I'm a pain in the ass to work with a lot of the times, and and to be that sort of patient that like you want the information that badly that you'll put up with just like the torture of getting it out of me. It's like there's sort of an incredible uh, symbiosis between like how he does things, how I do things, and like we drive each other crazy, and then like take a break for a year, and then like, you know, it works in a weird way. You know?
You're a pain in the ass. Is it because you wait to show what you do, or just because you're stubborn on some ideas?
I think like stubborn, and I like things to just be really well done, and like maybe impatient at points, and just like really just want things to be incredible, I think. Yeah.
What I find interesting, you work on very complex. It's an example of so many things you've done with him. That's at the Louis Vuitton Foundation in Paris, and sometimes it's a structure that is very complex that you work with. And in this case, it's when you look at it, it seems only walls with drapes and projections. You love to use different type of material, and sometimes it might be more complex than what it looks.
Yeah, I mean, the simpler things are always the hardest ones to achieve, I think. You know, the like the singular thing. Even this, like I have a hard time looking at this because it's like all the shit in the corners all wrinkled. You know? um, but yeah, I think that like, you know, really simple objects, really well made, are more difficult than things that just like have 400 lights, and you know, that's way more difficult, and especially in the context of live music and live touring, because you have a bunch of hands touching it. It's not a lot of like precise craftsmen that are touching this. It's just getting tossed around, and you know, has to be pretty robust, and so it's difficult sometimes to make things that look pure and simple.
That's one thing I've noticed with your work. Everything is very, and we can even see it with this light, it's very clean. You don't like to add a lot of stuff. It seems that things have to be somehow, you're looking for some purity, if I can use that word.
Yeah, but I think that, you know, iconography sort of remains and kind of like a simple idea. It's not just like a bunch of things dangling off of each other, you know? And and I think that like shows and concerts and before we started doing things was just like a bunch of different colored lights and 20 different light fixtures and just like things just going all at the same time. Uh, and then you just put like a funny set piece in the back. And we were like, let's approach this like architecture. You know, let's really look at like the polish and finish of the object and just like let the everything be incorporated into the object, the lighting, everything just be part of the object versus being like there's lighting, there's an object, there's a stage. You know, if you look back, it's sort of like early 2000s like concert touring. It's just always going to be the same thing. It's like this set piece, bunch of gags, a lighting truss, you know, and it's not thoughtful like kind of where we started going.
Another example of your work as well, it's the Easy collection of Kanye West. And that's interesting when you talk about architecture and geometry.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you were conscious, you were probably, but when we see it from the sky again, we see the geometry of the site. What was the idea? It's the humanity with the architecture as well. It's simple and complex at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, this is a Louis Kahn. It's a structure that he designed. He actually died in Penn Station in New York. Like he had a heart attack, and he had the plans for this structure in his pocket. And this took forever to build. It was just like always meant to be built, and you know he's an incredible architect, and the site had never been used. It was more about finding the site. There really isn't very much to the show. You know, it's the runway is just following the lines of the site. But I just, you know, if you see sort of like the tip of the island, there's this beautiful sort of marble structure, and there's like a giant bust of Roosevelt, and it's just like an incredible sight, you know. And sometimes you just don't want to add a bunch of other stuff on something that's just like does what it's supposed to do, you know.
We had also to talk about Drake, and we'll love him for sure. He's Canadian also. Canadian. And it's something that has an impact in the minds of people with this show, Over in the Three Amigos tour. So it's a good example of using more, I would say, expensive, but also bigger objects in a space, and using the format as well. It's a huge arena where it's presented. So it's using the maximum space you can. Can you tell us, even though you might be tired of talking about this one, but it's such an image that it's good to have an image that stays.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I make jokes about like how my grave is going to say the guy who was a flying Ferrari.
Yeah, we see it now.
This is there's a couple things. This started. I have a partner in my studio, my friend Brian, and Brian loves basketball, and we went to I think the All-Star game or something in LA, and we're sitting in our seats, and I'm looking at the basketball floor, and I was like, I wonder what the capacity is when you take out the whole size of the basketball floor. And we started looking, and we was just like Googling in our seats, and it was like 17,000, let's say. And then I was like, I wonder what the capacity is when you do an end zone stage, which is like the traditional stages are like one end of an arena, and then you sort of kill a bunch of seats behind it. And it was the same number. It was like 17,000 or something. And I was like, huh. So I could take over the entire floor of an arena, and it doesn't impact, or it's like the same as if I did an end zone stage at one end, and it's so much more impressive looking. So, and also, you know, the kind of like there's a bit of a joke in here is that we were going to make it on the floor and be a basketball floor because Drake is such a notorious basketball fan. So we started there. It was like, okay, it's a basketball. Like I was like, it's just a basketball floor. We're just going to do a show on basketball floor. And then we sort of just kept on going through iterations of it. And he's like the opposite of Kanye in this way, that he's like new ostentatiousness. Like it's like you want to add things and add things and add things, and there's gags and gags and gags. And it's like you're basically going through, like the whole show is just like a series of sort of like these sort of like icon, like the scorpion thing that you showed before, or this thing with the Ferrari, and then there's like a basketball court, and then there's a cracking ice floor, and then, you know, it's just like literally there's 25 things during the show. There's so much pyro in the building that you could, you know, and yeah, I think that it's like, how do you do sort of modern ostentatiousness, you know, which has a lot to do with scale and polish and kind of like, you know, grandiosity, and he's like that. He's like a performer's performer, you know. So,
is it easy to get his trust?
I don't think it's easy to get anybody's trust. Like, I think that one of the things that I realized, I used to be a little bit more like laissez-faire about being like, oh, this image is cool, don't worry, you know? And like it'd be like somebody's album cover forever, you know? But it's not mine. I don't have to worry about it. Like, I'm like, wasn't great, but I'm just gonna move on to something else. But like, I don't have to live with it in the same way that they have to live with it forever. And it made me sort of realize, like, oh man, if I did an album cover for myself, I'd be a psychopath, you know? Like, even with the best people in the world, I would just be like, so trust is like a complicated thing because you're navigating through what it means sort of like right now, what it means long term, how does it sit with you historically, like it just bravado and insecurity, like it's just like all at the same time, you know? And you want to do better than the last thing, and you want to be more, you know, those things are difficult to, and you do all of this in front of millions of people. So all your failures are just like scrutinized in like the most incredible way.
That's probably why you said there's an interview you did with 52 Insights, and you say, I deal with difficult people, but difficult people make beautiful things. And I think I am difficult.
You have to be. It's like you have to care about the thing, you know? And we also care about different things. It's like understanding, it's like understanding a person, and you know, certain people I get along,
Okay.
and certain people I, you know, we don't jive. It just is, you know.
In this case, is it through a discussion that you decide? Is it you bringing the idea of a circle or a circle for the stage?
Yeah, this was I was trying to think, and this is, you know, going back a few years, probably like 7, 8 years now, but
Right.
um,
Yeah, 2013.
I was trying to think like what was contemporary uh, ostentatiousness, like, and again, it's sort of goes back to scale, but I was also like, you know, at this point, I think a lot of people were inspired, sort of going back to sort of postmodernist architecture as their inspiration, and like blah blah blah, and sort of like this simple geometry. And I think, and I was like, it just needs to be sort of like this big kind of fuck you geometry, like so that every photo reads as kind of like, you know exactly where you are. Um, and originally the thing was it closed and it sort of opened and Pac-Man opened, but we just ran out of money, so it just was just Pac-Man open. But yeah, and again, it's like integrating all the pieces into the show versus having like little gags come out of the stage and things like that. So it's like the band is in the actual circle, so they sit in the middle, which you can kind of see here a bit, uh, and all the other surfaces are just like video surfaces.
Another one also we had to talk about is, of course, Rihanna. And you've done so many things with her. I'm amazed by when we go through all the pictures and all the things. And it's also an example of an artist that goes in many ways, that does a lot of things, and very, very talented, of course, and also very creative. And also, I presume that working with her, she's very close to the product, to what she wants to create as well.
Yeah, she again, she's like a completely different person than the two examples before. Um, I She has a very good sense of humor, and I like to antagonize people and uh, do things that like put her in like situations where like this pretty woman who's like obviously has a lot of like attitude and bravado and like blah 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 wouldn't be put into those situations. And so there's always a bit of humor to what I do with her. It's always like I'm always like just slightly trying to take the piss out of things. Um, and I don't know. I think that it's really funny because you know, it's probably been 12 years that I've worked with her, probably more. Um, and this is a perfect example. Like this thing in the background uh, is I found these machines that they used to have like for foam parties, like for raves and things, in the back of a warehouse at one of like the vendors. And I'm like, oh, these are incredible. Like, what can we do with these things? And like, you can't really see it, but on the bottom here, it's just filled with actual foam. It's not like an effect. It's not video. It's just like so like the band every night would just be like foam covering them. It just gets so messy, and everybody like on tour is like, "Fuck you, Willo," because they had to clean this like soapy stage every night. And it's just like really funny to me that instead of having something that's just like, okay, big video wall with like some funny content on it, it's just like we're just making this disgusting mess every night.
So sometimes it's very technical and sometimes it's not. It's using things that you find and discover. That's why you said curiosity is so important.
Yeah, and I think also like if you look at like science fictions, like science fiction that's been done well has like real humanity and grit and tangibility, and why, you know, the first Blade Runner was so incredible, or like why the original Star Wars were incredible. It's like their clothes were tattered, and it like, you know, they would like, you could tell like their mood boards were like, they looked at tribes in Africa and, you know, Bedouins and like da da da, and made like these incredible costumes, uh and it feels like there's a hand to it, you know, whereas like sci-fi that feels cheap is just like all digital and like all perfect and all precise, and I love the confluence of just doing something that's like very high tech, and then just like traditional kind of like set piece, or just like foam, or like whatever it is, like wind that's just blowing shit around, you know. So,
We were talking about trust. She seems to trust you quite a lot since you've been working on so many different projects. That's also a show, iHeartRadio, 2015.
she definitely is challenged, you know. She likes to be like, what else you got, you know. It's like, okay, I like the idea, but like, you can do better than that. And I'm like, all right, fine. This is a perfect example that I sent a treatment before this. It was just like a cool thing, but it didn't like have like, you know, the grit and like the sort of comedy, uh the boastfulness of this, you know. And this is during an award show, so there's so many limitations on like what you can bring on stage, how quickly you can do changeovers, blah blah blah, even if you're fucking Rihanna. and and I found this place in the desert in California, in the California desert, that just has all old planes and helicopters, and people, like some people rent them for movies. Um, and I was like, oh, let's put like a full size helicopter on the stage, and like you can only imagine that like the people at the show were like, no. And I'm like, yes, we can make this happen. And so I got this helicopter shipped over, and then we painted it all black and put a new propeller on it. And it all came from like a photo of like Biggie, uh, coming out of like the Junior Mafia, coming out of a helicopter on the West Side Highway, and just like sort of early 90s kind of like rap bravado. And the song was Bitch Better Have My Money. So it's just like all, you know, it's all boastful bravado. And I was like, how do we make that into an object? You know, it's like, how do I just like throw something on stage that's so like, fuck everybody. Like, this is not cute.
I'm sure that night she didn't say what else.
What's that?
I'm sure that for that
Oh, no,
project
yeah.
she didn't say what else. You also, there are many aspects, as we said, with your work, and sometimes it can be even a pop-up shop, again with Rihanna for the Fenty in New York City. And so it's an installation that will be there for a very short time, but it has to show the image of the artist as well and her work. So that must be a totally different approach, no?
Yeah, well, my office has a full interiors and architecture arm to it. Um, so they do, I mean, we collectively work on this stuff. So eh, the live component does a lot of like rapid deployments, and sort of the idea of just like building a structure overnight and taking it down the next day. So we're pretty well acclimated to just like building things really quickly. And then on the sort of interiors arm, they're just like way more kind of about crafting things. So this is where like my studio comes together, like where I can just like mash up a few people in my studio and be like, okay, what are we doing? So uh, this is an existing store in New York, and they had a bunch of fixtures in the store that we didn't really like. So hence the whole sort of vertical blind thing. And it's also meant to be sort of like Miami nights, like sweaty Miami nights, kind of like the light coming from behind the blinds. And
Also something interesting, it's the stage you did for the show that was for Savage and Fenty, again, collection, this collaboration, quite an impressive stage, but that is closer to theater somehow. That's interesting. It's almost going to something that we see in theaters, but bringing young talent and a new generation also towards this project.
Yeah, I really know how to explain this. I think that they'd shot a bunch of the campaign photos in Morocco, and I just was like, okay, let's take the sort of Mediterranean as kind of our sort of North Africa and Southern Europe, and as kind of the influence for all this. So it sort of has like moments of Spain and Greece and, you know, all together. And yeah, it was meant to be sort of like this multi-performance stage. So I don't know if you've watched the show, but it sort of goes to sections of the scenic as different parts of the show.
Well, again, it's a different way to present fashion. One thing I wanted to, I thought when I saw those images, I wanted to mention another example of your work. It's this collaboration with Nike and the NBA. I find it very, very impressive. It's done almost like a show when we see the way it's done. So people would get in and suddenly they would discover this new collection.
Yeah, so it was, you know, the keynotes, you know, the sort of like the president of the company comes out on the stage and there's a big screen and, you know, made famous by like Apple keynote. And that was really the format that everything has been done in. And they were like, we want to deconstruct the keynote. And I was like, okay. And basically it's, you know, the NBA and Nike coming together. And what we did was you'd walk into a room and it was this big monolithic screen that would start playing sort of like a collage of all like sort of Nike NBA moments, blah, blah, blah. And we had Kobe Bryant narrated. He was like the voice of God. Rest in peace, Kobe. And then the walls started splitting apart. And then was to reveal all of the new jerseys and all the new sort of like Nike product. And then athletes would start coming out. And the idea was, and now's a really good moment to use this example, but when the screen sort of like comes towards you and it moves really slow, but like people start to move out of the way, the person that was right next to you 2 minutes ago that was a complete stranger, you're now complicit. You have to move together. You're now in it together. And then like the whole experience becomes different. The minute that you have to like engage in things together. And it was like really the idea of let's take out the passive participant and like make him an active participant. And then like the athletes would just walk out onto the floor. There wasn't a stage or anything. So it made things very kind of, you know, a sense of like democracy and also very participatory. And I always use the example like when there was the ice storms in Montreal when we were younger and like everybody lost power, you got to know your neighbors very, very quickly. And like people that you live next door to for 10 years, all of a sudden, like, you know them. And I like that idea of just sort of like throwing people into a thing together, and they have to deal with it. You know?
I'd like to talk also about, I don't know how to put it, meaning it's the budget. Because you've said also, I worked with the problem. I don't start with the dream. Dreams come after the problem. That does explain a little bit, but also we need to achieve sometimes a budget. I hope you agree with this, because we tend to forget, maybe in Canada, more than anywhere else, not judging anybody, but sometimes to achieve a concept or an idea, you need a certain amount of, you need great ideas, but you need to realize them, no?
Oh yeah, I'm super fortunate. Like I get to do like these totally ridiculous things that cost millions of dollars, and like I don't, you know, I don't wouldn't be able to tell you how to get to that point. I'm like my life is a sequence of sort of bizarre events that sort of landed me where I am. But I don't know. I'm not quite sure if I understand the question either. Like in the sense that,
Well, no, it's the fact that sometimes you do, I suppose, some ideas cannot be realized because people don't have the budget to
oh yeah,
realize them. But sometimes also, I think it helps to realize some of the dreams, no?
oh yeah, yeah. You know, I think that a lot of being a creative or designer, musician, whatever it is like exorcising. Like it's like getting shit out of your heart or your brain and just like putting it out into the world. And it's almost like a sense of relief to just like get rid of it, you know? Uh, and I think that, you know, I'm really fortunate to be able to be like, I can some fucking weird idea. I'm gonna drag a helicopter out onto a stage, like, or whatever it is, and I have the means to do it. It's incredible. Like it's a blessing. You know?
Is there somebody you haven't worked with that you'd like to? I know it's not easy, but sometimes there is somebody, maybe it's better not to tell.
Yeah, like not really. Like I think that my interest is more um in sort of like expanding um my mediums. You know, I think that like got really good at doing shows and interiors and branding and blah blah blah. So I'm just like figuring out what the sort of next challenges are going to be for us, you know. And
I'm
I also
fine.
like it's become us, you know, over the years. It used to be like me, and now it's become sort of a group of people. So.
Hmm. Time flies, but we have to talk about Jay-Z, and we have a very good example of um, the way also you work, not only for stage, but it could
But
be a
you
whole
guys
concept. And
misspelled Jay-Z.
oh, sorry, I'll skip the one. It's great because in this case, it shows all the graphic design that is related to the advertising after
Mm-hmm.
and the way it's presented within the city. And
Mm-hmm.
it shows also how the industry has evolved, that it's not only you come out with an album and then you do a show and that's it. It's
Mm-hmm.
a lot more than that. And you have to deal with all those aspects.
I think you broke up a little bit.
Yes,
Okay.
which was about the fact the industry has changed a lot.
Yeah, I think with this, it's you know people they don't give you know like marketing people don't give a lot of credit to the audience and like the sense of discovery and you know all of this stuff. It's like it's exciting to people, and if you just like give them all the information and like and we just put out this campaign with that, there wasn't even the first go around, there wasn't even Jay-Z's name. It just said 444.
Mm.
And the news picked it up and they were talking about how it was like religious scripture and blah, blah, blah. And then like kids were on the internet trying to figure out what it was. And like Jay hadn't even announced that he was putting out a record. So, and then we put out a thing during the NBA All-Star game. Oh no, it was the finals, and we just put out this film. And originally it had like Jay rapping on top of this film, and I was like, we should just remove you altogether from it. And he was like, what? It's like, we're gonna pay like, however much it is to put a commercial during the NBA finals. And I'm like, yeah, but let people just like lose their minds trying to figure out what the fuck this is. And so we just put out this video with music, and then it was just like tagged 444. And people were like, what the fuck? And then there was like a bunch of like conversations online, and then like finally the second round we did the Jay-Z thing. But by this point everybody knew it was that already. So.
And talking about purity and eliminating all the noise, we have a great example of that as well.
Yeah, it's great. It's like it's rarer to see like something that's pure than to see something that's busy, and so it stands out more to have something that's just like really kind of.
Is there we must not forget, we won't really talk about it, but you did for Lady Gaga the Monster Ball tour in 2011. It's quite a while, but it's interesting to see the first shows and the way her career has evolved and how you got into that universe as well. I think it's a great fit as well. Maybe, and also we could have talked about Florence and the Machine, very impressive artist that has so much energy. I think it's somebody you also like, and we see that energy in that picture as well. But is there anything you can, any projects, and also maybe congratulate you about the Grammys, even though it's best packaging for St. Vincent, and also a great amount of work, and those are such perfect example of what I was talking about when we talk about purity and trying to eliminate so many things that we tend to put too much in pictures. But is there, and I see that I have a lot of subject I could have talked with you with, and we could go for an hour more, but is there anything you can tell us before we go? Any project we should be aware of, watching for?
Oh, like things that are coming up in the future?
Yes.
Is that what
Maybe
you
there's a scoop or something?
No scoops. No, we're just really, I think my studio, we've been really focused on doing like furniture and products and things like that. I think I did a long run of doing shows and music, and it's been great. And I think I'm just going to do less of that and more towards like interior design and furniture design and things like that.
It's interesting. Interior design is almost coming back to your roots, like when you were doing stores.
Yeah.
So, merci beaucoup. As we say, we're proud of you, as if I was your father, but the Canadian family, the Montreal family is very happy. And I'm glad you shared with us all those thoughts and all this work. We're always proud of people that prove that Montreal is a creative city and proves it outside Canada.
Extremely. It's an incredible place.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.